G'day, I'm Paul. So, I love kimchi, but the only thing I love more than kimchi is the Hyundai i30N. It is such a fun little hot hatch to drive. It cracks, it pops, does everything that a hot hatch should do in this day and age. That is why I am super excited to show you guys some footage that we were sent in of the new Hyundai i30N with a dual clutch transmission. Where did this footage come from? Well, this is from one of our eagle-eyed followers in Sydney. Hyundai Australia is testing the i30N in Australia with the dual clutch transmission, and we have snapped images and video of the Fastback, which is kind of a sedan hatch type. Not really a hatch, but not really a sedan. It's like a mix between the two. I actually think it looks a little bit like an AU Falcon at the back, but anyway, let's not go there. Why is it in Australia? Why are we getting these cars so early? Well, Hyundai Australia is in a unique position because it does a lot of ride and handling tuning right here in Australia for the Australian market. Some of the tunes that the guys here in Australia do are then exported to other markets as well. They've been really successful in creating a custom and bespoke ride and handling tune that suits our market and then can be sent abroad. And that is why they get the car so early. They want to make sure that it's ready to rumble before the dual clutch version of the i30N goes on sale. And why does it have so much camouflage? Well, that is because there is a slight styling change coming to this car. Now, if you look really closely at the back of this car, you'll see bigger exhaust pipes. So the updated version of the i30N hatch and Fastback will get the same size exhaust outlets as the Veloster N that was recently revealed. So that should make it look a little more aggressive at the rear. It's also going to get a new wheel design. So if you look closely at those wheels, you can see there's a slightly different design there. And keep in mind as well that the rest of it will flow very much in the same way that the i30N line hatch has. So it's going to have a few sharper angles, a different set of headlights, and also a bit more LED lighting around the rear. You can actually see a render that we have here of what the i30N is likely to look like when it is launched. And I think it is a pretty sharp looking car, and I hope they retain that baby blue color. I think that looks fantastic and really makes the i30N stand out on the road. Under the bonnet, it's going to retain the same cracking 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine that will drive the front wheels. Yes, Hyundai is working on what looks to be like a mid-engined all-wheel drive supercar type thing. This isn't that. This is simply going to be the same carryover engine. It produces 202 kilowatts of power and 353 newton meters of torque. It also has an overboost feature that cranks that up to 378 newton meters for up to 20 seconds. Now, what about the noise? I think this is the bit that everyone's been waiting for. Will it sound like a Golf GTI where it sort of cracks and pops through the gears? And will it still have that trademark burble and, I don't know, I guess the gunshot noises that the i30N currently has? Well, have a listen to this as the car drives past the camera. Yes, there is no cracking and popping there. So based on the information we have, we believe this is a European specification car, which means it will be fitted with a petrol particulate filter. The good news is that we don't have very strict emissions laws in Australia, so it is highly likely that the car that we get in Australia won't have a petrol particulate filter, so it means that it should still have that signature crack and pop. But I bet you're wondering, what does it sound like compared to the current i30N? Well, here is the i30N Fastback going around a track. This is the manual version that's sold in Australia without a particulate filter. Have a listen to it. Big difference there, isn't there? You can really hear the cracks, the pops, and all the emotion from the manual version. Now, when do we expect to see this car in Australia, or the rest of the world for that matter? Well, it was actually meant to be revealed at the end of 2019, but due to a whole bunch of delays, we won't be seeing the car here in Australia until early 2021. So you're gonna have to wait just a little bit longer before we get our hands on a dual clutch version of the i30N. Okay, let's have a chat about the actual dual clutch transmission and what you can expect from it. Now, a bit of background here. Albert Biermann is a man that likes his beer, I've heard. He is from BMW's M division. He worked there for over a decade, and he was poached by the guys at Hyundai to come across and hone the N division. He actually worked briefly on the Kia Stinger before it was launched and has been fully involved in the i30N. He actually said, we're not going to release this car if the dual clutch isn't good, which is the reason this car's been out for such a long time without a dual clutch. Hyundai only had I mean, what I think is a pretty poor dual clutch available to them, and it just didn't really work in this performance application. So he rightfully waited. I'm glad they did. Instead of releasing a version of this car that was just going to be disappointing. Now, what about the gearbox that's actually fitted to the i30N? Well, it's an 8-speed wet clutch, dual clutch transmission. What is the difference between a wet clutch and a dry clutch? Well, a dry clutch is often used in entry-level cars, small SUVs, city cars, that kind of thing. They can overheat a little bit more because you don't actually have that oil submersion of the clutch. And that means that in small SUVs and city cars, if you do sit them on hills or put a lot of load on them without the car moving, they tend to just be a little bit funny and not very nice. So that's why Hyundai's gone down the path of a wet clutch setup. Now, according to Hyundai, a wet clutch is submersed in oil, and it means that it reduces operating temperature because you're using that oil to disperse the heat energy, and it's improving lubrication as well, which in theory should improve shift quality. And that also means that at low speed, it shouldn't be as jarring. With some of these dry clutch setups, they're kind of on-off, there's no in-between. And that's where you strike a balance with a wet clutch. It kind of gives you that smoothness as it takes off. Now, some of the special features that are being fitted to this dual clutch transmission from Hyundai, this is marketing lingo, not my words, so I'm sorry if it sounds a bit silly. N grin shift. That is basically a 20-second period where you can have overboost, which increases torque by 7%. I don't know why they had to give it such a silly name. N power shift, another curiously named technology. It engages when throttle position is at 90% or higher. Now, Hyundai didn't really explain what this means, but according to them, it improves shift speeds by maintaining torque delivery. I guess that just means it shifts a little bit quicker and keeps you moving, perhaps. I don't really know. Finally, N Track Sense Shift. Now, this is probably going to win an award for Marketing Spin of the Year. It's effectively a sport mode, but according to Hyundai, it selects the right gear and shift timing just like a professional race car driver to provide optimal performance. Gee, that sounds like fun. So there is some really interesting marketing lingo there, but for the most part, it sounds like they've actually spent a bit of time engineering this gearbox so it works properly. Okay, so what do I think about all this? Well, to begin with, I think this should give the i30N the performance kick it needs to compete with stuff like the Golf GTI. You've got to remember that there is a brand new Golf GTI coming, which will be a whole lot sharper than the current one, and the current one has been out for a long time and is still incredibly fun to drive. The key thing that Hyundai's been missing is an automatic transmission, and this should really seal the deal. Where it won't work is if they've done what Ford has done with the Focus ST. They kind of just rushed through a gearbox and just stuck it in a car, and it really isn't that impressive. I'm hoping that Hyundai has spent enough time on this to make it good, and I think with guys like Albert Biermann from the BMW M division, he knows exactly what he's doing here, and I don't think he would let a shitty gearbox get through the mix and into this car if it wasn't approved by him. I really hope as well that it has all the performance characteristics of the manual. When you're in the checkered flag mode, that N mode, it cracks, it pops, it is just such a fun car to drive, and there is not one i30N that I've driven that hasn't put a smile on my face every single time it makes all those crazy sounds. So the automatic version of this with the dual clutch really needs to meet the brief there for it to hold up to that image that everyone is expecting here. The buyers that have bought the manuals know what it sounds like, they know what to expect from it, and I think if they're going to go and tell all their friends about there now being an automatic version, you need to win these people over. You can't just release a gearbox that isn't fit for purpose and doesn't have all of the sounds that people want from a hot hatch today. Remember, hot hatches are bought by people who may not have the money for a high-end sports car or don't want a high-end sports car. They want a car that they can drive to work every day, and this is going to fit the bill if they can get it right in terms of the gearbox. The suspension's good on this car, everything else is nicely rounded, just make sure the gearbox is right. Okay, so before we wrap this one up, I just want to run you through some of the gear that Hyundai has coming up. So N is the division that does all the performance cars, but Hyundai has now launched the N line, which is kind of like, I don't know, the S line or the R line that Volkswagen does. It's effectively sporty looking cars that aren't really as sporty as the proper fully fledged N version. And Hyundai has a few of those coming up. So they've just released the i30 N line sedan, and that is the car you're seeing on the screen right now. I think it looks fantastic. They've got so many cool angles here. This is also known as the Elantra in other markets, but for Australia, it will be the i30 sedan, and it will be offered with an N line. This will be powered by a 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol engine and an optional manual as well, so that should be really good to drive. Later on, we're going to see the Sonata N line. So the Sonata is the bigger sedan. These are used by some police forces, and the N line will bring with it those sharp N looks, but obviously without the N performance. Then early next year, we have the i30N, the proper N, coming with this dual clutch transmission. There's also rumors that Hyundai is going to be rolling out N versions of other cars in their range, such as the Tucson, don't mind seeing a Santa Fe N. You know, they did a drift bus in Australia, which I thought was pretty cool. That was powered by a turbo V6, and it was an absolute drift machine. So they're heading down the right path. They have some really creative ideas, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for Hyundai, especially this dual clutch transmission. So if you did enjoy this video, I'd love it if you could share it, hit the like button as well. Also press subscribe and the bell icon. That's going to tell you every single time we publish something new. If you haven't checked out the rest of our channel, have a look around. We've got some fun drag races and other really cool content there. But until next time, take it easy.